Welcome to my review of Twisted Metal 2 for the PlayStation. This is probably my favorite game on the PlayStation 1. Amazing fucking game. I still think it holds up today. I've played it recently and it's still fucking awesome. I mean, no game is perfect. There are some issues with the, the control can feel a little choppy sometimes. Sometimes when you're trying to go up, inclines and stuff like that, you do fly around sometimes, but it's kind of a trade-off to get the type of gameplay that this game provides. It's kind of a little bit of a trade-off where, to be able to do some of the crazy moves and to be able to counter enemies and really have that fast pace of combat, the game has to be kind of has to control like that and be kind of jittery. Because, if you tried to make it a realistic driving game with realistic controls, you just wouldn't have the kind of speed to be able to do the kind of maneuvers you can in this game. So I think it's kind of just a trade-off, but it's also part of it is because of the time. These consoles were more primitive. The PlayStation, Saturn, etc., were more primitive 3D machines. So, there were limitations there, and I'm sure, But even if you look at the Twisted Metal game that came out in 2012, there was, there was still a similar jittery type of control. Even with the modern visuals and stuff. So I do think the gameplay, it's somewhat of a necessity to be kind of like that. Though I think it could have been tightened up in areas for sure, but it is a hard balance to get that perfect. But, I mean, in this game, it really elevated itself from the original game. You had your usual selection of vehicles, as you did in the first game, which really gives the game a lot of variety, because each vehicle really handles differently, has different special weapons. And it really makes the game, playing through with each character really feel different. Plus, the second one really has some great animated endings, if you're into that kind of thing, which made it interesting to see how all the scenarios would play out, especially before you could just look them up on, YouTube, because back then there was no YouTube or internet or anything like that. So it gave you a little incentive, but it was just really fun, even just playing through the entire game with different characters, just for the variety in gameplay. Because they also have different armor and stuff like that too. So some of them will die really fast, but they may be able to drive a lot faster. Like the motorcycle, Mr. Grimm dies in a few hits, but his special move is extremely powerful if you can land it. It's hard to hit enemies with, but if you land it, it might take away like half of their health or something. So it's a trade-off. Each vehicle really has its own strengths and weaknesses, and it really makes the game unique. And the game is kind of like a fighting game, but with cars. So it's almost like a fighting game in the way you counter your enemies, and how if you're approaching a certain enemy, their vehicle has certain strengths, like they may have more armor, so you may be faster and you might be able to circle around them and hit them with your specials, but if they hit you, may kill you in one hit. So there's a lot of balancing and just variety when you fight different opponents. Of course, in this game, you're often fighting multiple opponents at the same time, so you're not, always going to get into one-on-one confrontations like a fighting game. But the goal of each stage, as with the first game and all the other games, is to eliminate all the enemies on each stage. When you kill all the enemies on each stage, you get a password. And if you use that password, it'll replenish all your lives. You'll get your default lives. I think it's 3 lives. And you'll have 3 lives to clear out all the enemies if you put in the password. And if you do lose a life, it does save your progress until you lose all your lives. So, if you killed a few vehicles or you damaged a few enemies and then you die, you will respawn and the enemies will have the health that they left off at. So you basically have like 3 lives to clear each stage. And of course you got infinite continues and passwords, so you can work your way through the game. This footage is all from my hard playthrough, which I did a tutorial as well, which I'll link in the description. But yeah, this game really, for me, was an amazing game, and like I said, it still holds up for me today. When I played through it recently and did the hard mode playthrough, I had a fucking great time playing the game. You also have special moves in this second game that you can do by doing fighting game type special moves. By executing certain button commands in a certain sequence, you will do things like you can jump, you can use this shield that comes around your vehicle like that and protects you for a few seconds. You can use freeze, like you just saw me use. That's a special move to freeze the enemy in place briefly. Napalm, and there's a bunch of them that you can do. And they use up your special bar, which regenerates, but it takes some time to regenerate. But it balances it out so that you can't abuse them like crazy. So you want to use them, tactically. But it's really, really good. And you also have turbo, which it lets you get the fuck out of certain areas. You have turbo pickups that you get. And once you waste all your turbo, you got to find more on the map if you want it. But turbo is also great for ramming enemies. You'll do good ram damage if you have turbo, especially if you're one of the heavier characters and you ram a smaller vehicle, you can really fuck it up. So this is the final stage, and in this final stage, it's really cool. First, you have to destroy 8 vehicles, but then there is a multi-stage boss fight with multiple forms you have to go through. So it's a very cool final boss fight. In reviewing this game, I guess the difficult thing when trying to give it a number score, which, I'm not a huge fan of that, but that is kind of the way I structure these reviews because it's really hard to give a final kind of verdict without having some kind of score. Though I think really the meat of the review is what I have to say in the review and not so much the score I give it at the end. I mean, my scoring is not always perfect. It's really hard for me to assign a number to a lot of games, especially when we have modern games that have done a lot of things great. And, the question is, do I review it based on how it held up at that time or do I review it how it holds up now? So sometimes I struggle with trying to give a final score because of things like that. But, I'm probably just fucking over analyzing it as usual. You also have health power-ups, which if you get them, you can get some of your health back. But the main way to get your health back, if you want to get all your health back, if you're really low on health, is to go into one of the health ramps that has electricity around it. You get a few uses of that on each stage. So you want to try to take advantage of it if you really need it. Also, you can use your radar to see where the health pickups are, and you can try to drive to them and get several of them if you want to power up your health that way. It's just more of an endurance to try to grab those health power-ups if you really need all your health back. It's going to take longer to get it all back. Though there are certain health power-ups that are not labeled any differently, but if you know where they are, you can pick them up and get a full health replenishment. So there are a few of those sometimes in the stages. And I believe you get a separate password in this stage for the final boss itself, which I did not know at the time. I think I used to do it all in one go. So keep that in mind if you are playing this game. Just a quick tip without checking my tutorial. If you manage to clear out the 8 enemies, pause the game and it'll show a password for the final bosses. So you can at least start at the final bosses and with all your lives and shit back. So that makes it a lot easier. So keep that in mind. But yeah, you can also use your radar to see where enemies are. It gives you a general idea. You have a lot of different missiles and things you can pick up like the first game. Homing missiles that have a slight homing ability to home in on your targets. Even the fire missile has a slight homing, I believe. But the homing missile has a pretty strong homing property. You also have remote detonators that were added for this second game, which allow you to place a bomb down, then press another button to detonate them. And they can be used very strategically. There's a lot of weapons to choose from. So it gives it a lot of variety in how you attack enemies and how you fight. You can also do weapon runs where you just avoid enemies for a while and just try to grab as many weapons as you can and then bring them to the fight. There's a lot of strategies and a lot involved in doing well in the game. And it's actually a really cool game to even try to speed run. Me and my friend Cool Hand Mike, who's also played games on the channel, and also has his own channel you should check out with some great gameplay. We did a speed run in co-op on the easy mode, which, it's very easy, but we just tried to do it as fast as we could for fun. And we got the first place for a little while. But, neither one of us are really speed runners, but occasionally we'll fuck around and just do a speed run. But, yeah, so, of course, after you beat the final boss, you get these animated type of cutscenes, which are pretty cool. They're actually really well done. They probably have my favorite endings in the series. I thought they were the most interesting, and they're pretty comedical as well. There's some funny ones, especially with the clown. Though one of my favorite endings is still in Twisted Metal 1, where if you beat the game as Sweet Tooth, the clown, you get an ending where he finds a brown paper bag that he was talking to, and that's what he achieves, and he's happy about that, and then he just leaves. I like that ending the best. It was all text too, so you had to use your imagination. But actually, they did release movie scenes of how the endings would have looked. There was actually movies made for the ending movies, but it was never used. But yeah, this is a great game. And it also has 2-player co-op, which is fucking awesome. Super, super fun. That's in split screen. It's local co-op. No online back then. But yeah, I would give this game a 9 out of 10. I still think it holds up really well. And it's still an awesome game today. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.